Hello, everybody, and welcome to Virtual Trek Con with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
We are joined by Mr. Robert Hewitt Wolfe and Armin Shimerman, and today we are doing a deep dive into Star Trek Deep Space Nine writing and acting and how things changed from the page to the stage, especially with respect to Armin and Quark. How you guys doing?
Good. I'm in the 25, 26, 27 years that I've been doing panels, I think this is going to be the most interesting panel that I've ever done.
Promise low, deliver high. Like,
That's a lot to
lower
live.
expectations. This panel is going to be terrible. Like, I have no idea what we're talking about. Robert's an idiot. And then, you know, it's like the engineer. It's like Scotty. He always like padded his work times.
So somewhere between the most interesting and the least interesting. Somewhere
You know, it's a panel. It's definitely a panel.
It's a panel.
Okay. So Robert actually came up with the idea behind this panel, and we all fell in love with it. We thought it sounded amazing. Robert, do you want to tell us a little bit about the genesis of this idea?
Well, my thought was, I think one of the fun things about what happens behind the scenes is that every character on screen that you see is really a collaboration at the end of the day between the writers who are coming up with the words that are being said, the director who's helping shape the way the scene moves and shaping performance, but ultimately, obviously, the sort of the final word in the character is the actor who embodies that character. And great characters, I believe, are a fusion of those things. And I think Quark is a great character. But what's, I think, most interesting about Quark, when I think about Quark as a character, is that there was probably more, I wouldn't call it friction, but there was more
Disassociation?
Sure, that's a good word. I don't know, because I don't want to oversell it and say it was conflict or say it was like friction, but I would say that there was a larger disconnect in some ways between what we were imagining in the writer's room when we wrote for Quark and what was happening on stage when Armin was bringing his considerable skills to Quark. And I thought it would be an interesting thing to talk about just in terms of like, for people who are interested in that process of writing and acting and how television is made, but also who love these characters and are wondering like, how did they come to be? You know, I think there's still people out there who think that every word that an actor says on stage, they make up on the spot. You know, there's also people who believe that, you know, the writer's just like the king, you know? I mean, this is more these days when people hear about showrunners more than they used to. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, of course, it's collaboration. And I just think that the collaboration between the writers and Armin was the most interesting collaboration because it was probably the one where the character evolved the most from page to stage. Is that fair, Armin?
That's fair. It's all news to me, but it's fair.
No, it's not.
It is fair. You know, Sirach, I'm sure will agree, we get a page 24 hours, 48 hours before we have to, you know, say it in front of a camera. And we have to make some snap judgments. We have some ideas about the character, and we take what the writers have given us. And I believe the writers on our show are a little closer to royalty than perhaps, you know, I've been on shows where you improv everything, and I hated that. I want words to be put in my mouth so that I can say something, you know, smart. So I would say, yes, there was probably disconnect, but one of the problems, and Sirach, join me if you agree with me, don't join me if you don't, is that we got very little input from the writers while we were shooting an episode, which would have been, in hindsight, enormously helpful. Certainly we were getting the writer's point of view from the director, because the director had his tone meeting with the writers and they were told, you know, how the scene should go. But then, of course, with us, with Sirach and I and the other 7, the directors rarely ever gave us notes because we were the series regulars and we didn't want to get into trouble.
Right. Well, I think, you know, it was an interesting thing. Star Trek was a very interesting animal in terms of the way writers were treated. Because on the one hand, there was a culture of the show where the words that were on the page were the words that were expected to be said, as with as much fidelity as possible.
With all due respect, I'm not saying anything against that, but just for Sirach, I'm just going to say this to bring back a memory. DLP Lovey.
DLP Lovey.
Do you know what that is, Robert?
I do not.
So our script coordinator, if we didn't hear DLP Lovey from the script coordinator, we knew we had to do it over again. DLP, dead letter perfect.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, and it's a very rare show, by the way, where dead letter perfect is what people are aiming for. And Star Trek, I think, had that culture partially because, like, a lot of the science fiction-y stuff had to be done so precisely to make the plots make sense. But I think it was just also, like, it was just the way it was. By the time I got there, it was just the culture. It was the way it was done. So on the one hand, you had this dead letter perfect culture, which is rare. But then the next level down was that we had an non-writing executive producer who wanted to completely control the set. And so he forbade writers from appearing on the set, from being there. On a lot of shows that I've worked, the writer is there the entire time his or her episode is being shot. And so they're there to immediately give feedback like, that. Can we do that? Okay, I like that. Or maybe could we do it this way? Or this is not, and usually working through the director, then their feedback gets to the actors. That's how it works on a lot of shows. On Star Trek, Deep Space Nine in particular, we were almost never on set. We were discouraged from being on set. And so the actors never really got our firsthand impressions of how they were interpreting our words. So it was a very strange elevation of the writing on the one hand, and then suppression of the writers on the other hand, that made this very strange void, I think. But particularly, I remember, I want to talk about, you remember Profit and Loss?
Oh yeah, Profit and Loss, absolutely.
Profit and Loss.
Season 2, Sirach, if you'll remember, it was the one where the Cardassian lady and a couple of her students or disciples, they arrive at Deep Space Nine.
Natima,
exactly.
Played by Mary Crosby.
Correct. Terrific. So, as written, Profit and Loss was a farce. Profit and Loss was a riff on Casablanca with tons of in-jokes and lots of riffs on the actual scenes and dialogue of Casablanca. And it was written as a complete farce. And then we started getting dailies, not being on stage. And Armin, God bless him, was playing it straight. He played the romance. He went for it. He played the drama and the romance in every scene with Natima. In scenes with Rom or other scenes, like he would play the comedy for sure. And Armin is a gifted comedic actor. But I remember us, I'm talking out of school now, tearing our hair out, going like, he's not playing the jokes in these scenes. He's going for the drama. And it was just one of those moments when you're like, okay, we're gonna have to cut all the jokes from these scenes, or most of them, because the actor has committed to the drama and the romance of the scenes, not to the comedy. And that's one of the moments when I remember, specifically the writer's office being a little bit apoplectic about what Armin was doing on stage. I just watched the episode yesterday, by the way. It's really great. It turned out terrific. And your performance is terrific. And the way you committed to the drama and to the romance makes it work. But it wasn't what we had thought it was going to be. So I just wanted to bring that up and see what you had to say about that.
I didn't know.
Of course not.
I got the script. Let's say I was lucky and got it 48 hours before we started shooting.
Right.
And I looked at it. It was Casablanca. I thought, okay, I already sound like Humphrey Bogart. I'm going to play it like Humphrey Bogart. And so, but no one told me that it was a farce. So without any direction, without any tone meeting to go to, or having not participated in that part of the preparation, I just played it the way I thought I should play it. No one said to me, no, it's wrong. You got to do it differently, which I would have been No, I mean, not say that. I was going to say would have been happy to do. I'm not sure I would have been happy, but and I will talk about that during the course of this panel. But the truth is, no one told me, and so I just thought I was doing the right thing.
And I think actually for the episode, it was the right thing, to be honest. And I think it speaks to having faith in an actor who inhabits the character 15 hours a day, 5 days a week, as being the person who, in some ways, is the best judge of that. I mean, obviously, I think, look, Deep Space Nine turned out great. Maybe it would have benefited from more writer presence on the set. Maybe not. Who knows? But I just think it's a really interesting example of that, what you said, disassociation. Do you remember? So do you remember any time when you heard back that we thought you were not playing something the way we thought you should be?
Yes, once, and you were there, but it wasn't this episode. And I don't want to talk about profit or loss, but I know it's one of Ryan's favorite moments. We were shooting the root beer scene. You remember
Absolutely,
that?
one of the best. For my money, it's the best scene in all of Star Trek history. Personally, that's what I think. Yes.
We could talk about that scene because it's one of my favorites too, and we can talk about how it came to be. But I want to hear the first part of this.
So Robert remembers. Sirach, you weren't there because it was Andy and I, and I think Max is probably in the background somewhere. But we were doing the root beer scene, and like Renee, Andy and I, and Renee and I would often get together during the weekend. I think everybody knows this. And we would rehearse thinking, okay, how are we going to play this? Because the makeup made it difficult after about 10 hours to function. We were just brain dead. And so in order to stay ahead of that situation, we would rehearse. So it was like a play for us so that we could go into the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th hour and on fumes and still be giving you a performance. So Andy and I had looked at that scene, and when we came in on Monday to shoot it, the director, Jimmy James something, James, I should remember, I don't remember.
Is it Conroy?
Conroy, yeah. He said, that's not funny. And we said, we don't think it is a funny scene. And he said, but the writers have told me it's a funny scene. You have to play it funny. And that was great, because that was pretty much the first time anyone ever told me what the writers thought, But at that point, Andy and I were very committed to playing it rather seriously, comedically, but serious, in our own comic way.
Yeah.
And so he said to me and Andy, we're going to have to bring Ira and Robert down and take a look at this. And you guys came down. Were very generous about asking us if we could play both ways. We showed you both ways to the best of our ability. You and Ira conferred for, I can't think it was more than 30 seconds. And I can't remember whether it was you, it was probably Ira. Ira turned to James and said, shoot it Armin's way. So,
yeah.
That was the only time during the course of an episode that I'd ever gotten direct feedback from the writers about what they wanted and understand my position. At the same time I was shooting that episode, I was probably already shooting Buffy episodes. And what you said before was true on the Buffy set, was that Joss Whedon was always there.
Right.
And if we weren't doing something the way that he had conceived it, we were told immediately. We went by the director. He always went through the director.
Right.
And we were told, no, you can't do it that way. Do it this way. And that, so I was in a disconnect because I was now used to that culture. And I was used to my culture with the Deep Space Nine culture, which had been going on longer for me. But it was a sort of a disconnect.
Yeah. I mean, that scene turned out terrifically. And I remember coming down and, it was always that kind of like, I think, like, at the end of the day, we did a lot of comedy on Deep Space Nine, even in episodes that weren't necessarily comedic. There were often fun little runners. I mean, I was just watching. We just talked about Past Tense the other day, and there's the whole runner at the beginning where you're trying to get the Negus's nephew out of prison,
right?
And that's a fun little runner. And so we always tried to do at least a little bit of comedy, but ultimately we were a drama show, and I think that we were not as well wired for comedy. And I think comedy is one of those things that kind of is in the eye of the beholder. Once Ira and I came down and saw what you guys were doing, we agreed that it was funny, still funny the way you were doing it. But on top of that, you were bringing real emotion to it. You were bringing this real perspective of these two outsiders looking at what the Federation was doing. This is Way of the Warrior, right? And bringing some real kind of like levels that we had never imagined. So it was definitely, a lot of these are situations, honestly, where what came out on the page was improved by what is on the stage. That's always the goal. And you guys were so skilled. But I always just thought, like, whether you knew it or not, we were always thinking we wanted to push. We thought Quark, in the initial way that we were sort of told by Michael how Quark was supposed to function, that Quark was the comedic character on the show.
So did I. I felt the same way.
That said, though, your instincts as an actor, I believe, are always to bring dramatic truth to the character.
That to me is what's most funny. If you're going to be sort of farcical, it has to be more important to you than it normally would be, and that's a dramatic take. And if you're that dramatic, it's funny because it's overly dramatic. It's funny.
100%. But that said, like your cadences and deliveries sometimes of the comedic lines were not comedic cadences, right? You were doing dramatic cadences for some of these funny lines, and in a pure comedy, that's not how you would have done it at all, right? If this were a sitcom, there's no way you would have played the character that way,
no,
right?
But it wasn't a sitcom because, as you said, it
wasn't
basically a drama.
Yes,
it was a very dramatic character. It was a drama. Max and I and some of the others were tangential to that drama. And God bless you for the comedy, not only for the work that we got to do, but being a scholar of Shakespeare only works if you put in the comedic scenes in the dramatic plays. Otherwise, 100%. People just tune out.
I mean, Romeo and Juliet starts out with a bunch of fish puns. You can imagine what the fish is supposed to be. And you know, various puns about pushing people against the wall. So there was definitely room for comedy in the show. I think the frustrations that we had, and these are all unexpressed frustrations, so that's why this is a fun panel, is that a lot of times in our mind, we were like, Ira came from a sitcom background, right?
Right.
Ira wrote for Brooklyn Bridge, I think.
No, not for Brooklyn Bridge. He wrote for the high school that was
Fame. He did Fame.
But I'm quite sure I was on Brooklyn Bridge for 2 seasons. Like, he wasn't on Brooklyn Bridge.
He did some sitcom.
Brooklyn Bridge was shooting while we were doing Deep Space Nine. So.
He did some sitcom right before Deep Space Nine, or right before Fame. Maybe it was like, it wasn't Brooklyn Bridge, but it was a New York set. I want to say Bronx Zoo, but I don't think that was a thing. But he was definitely on a sitcom before, and he'd come out to LA to write comedy, right? That was really where he was coming from originally. Not me. Although the first thing I ever got produced was a sitcom too. But it was a student sitcom at UCLA. So the first writing I'd ever done that got produced was also sitcom. And so I think we were like two sort of people who had at one time or other aspired to sitcom writing, and we were trying to write these sort of sitcom scenes every once in a while. And they'd go down to the stage and they'd become dramatic, more dramatic, still funny, still genuinely funny, but definitely more dramatic than we pictured them in our little ivory towers where we were staying.
I will pass down a little information that I had told the story many times, but I don't think you, Robert, have heard it. Maybe Sirach has, maybe he hasn't. Probably Ryan has. So
absolutely. I know where you're going with this, and I love it. Yeah.
When Max and I were both auditioning for Quark, and we met on the steps of Paramount after both of our auditions, I asked Max, how did you approach the role? And he said, well, it's a Ferengi. I approached it comically. And I said, I approached it dramatically. And because of that conversation, I assumed they chose me over Max because that's what they wanted, was a more dramatic approach to the Ferengi. So for years, Robert, that was always in the back of my head. And I play comic parts, that's what I do, but they always have a tone of drama.
And it's interesting because for us, like if we wanted a scene now to be purely comedic with the Ferengi, we would put Max into it.
Good.
Because he would play the comedy 100%. Like he would just go for the comedy. Like he would go for every joke. Like that's what Max. I mean, and
he's very good.
Enormously talented. I've said this before on previous appearances. We were so blessed to have such an enormously talented cast, not just from 1 to 8, but from like 9 to 23 or whatever the heck, or 30 or whatever. All the people who came apart from it. One of the things that did happen for us as writers was like, we realized that the more we wanted the scene to be purely comedic, the more it was important to put Max or Aaron into the scene, because they would just start chewing up the scenery, and the scene would become much frothier because suddenly Armin was essentially playing like not the straight man, but the straight man in a comedic team. Which is still a comedian.
Well, he was Costello, you know.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. You know, you were Martin, he was Lewis, I guess.
Right.
Look, and that's a wonderful comedic structure that we sort of ended up with at the end of the day. I want to go to an even like deeper, like more controversial thing, which is this: did you ever feel that playing Quark was reminiscent to playing Shylock in Merchant of Venice?
No. I've been asked that question before. No.
I've never asked it, and it was never our intention, but I wanted to ask it.
Sure. No, never. And ironically, because of Star Trek and the wonderful things that it has done for my life, and probably Sirach's as well, the opportunity to travel, I have been told, going to the far-flung areas of this planet, that different cultures see the Ferengi as different types of others, people that are outside of the culture. So being Jewish, I never thought of myself as Shylock. If you're an actor, all of it, Ryan, Sirach, you, Robert, all of it would agree, I believe, you must think that you're the hero of the scene.
100%.
You can never think that somehow you are the secondary person. And so I always thought that what I was doing as Quark, believe it or not, was absolutely the moral thing to do.
I agree that's how it played. I had certainly heard those controversies. And for me, like, especially like in the first 2 seasons of Deep Space Nine, I think I was the only Gentile on the staff. And so for me, it was like, I was trying to be sensitive to that, sort of like, because I did not want that to be a stereotypical character, or the Ferengi to be a stereotype. My intention was always like to make that character the hero of his own story, but also to make him like dangerous in some ways, and like a little bit more unpredictable, and a little bit less friendly to everybody.
And I was always grateful for those things in the script, Robert. When you guys gave me an enormous rainbow of colors to play, and I probably didn't always hit it out of the park, but I was always grateful for the
lots of triples when you didn't hit Homer. It was usually a triple.
But I was grateful for the opportunity because I'm not going to mention names, but there was a character similar to mine on a different show, and I thought, they're not writing for him the way my writers are writing for me. So.
Well, again, like one of the things I've always said to actors is that if we're writing you good stuff, that means we love you. And that's both as a human being, but also especially as a professional, because what inspires writers especially on a show with a big recurring cast and all kinds of people, to write scenes for actors is to know that those scenes are going to be terrific, you know, to have that confidence. And so if we got to write you a rainbow colors, it was because we knew that you had a rainbow of emotions to express those colors with.
Thank you. But not always the correct colors.
Well, no, I mean, I would argue that they are the correct colors because they're the colors that got on screen. So, you know, at the end of the day, like, we could have always reshot a scene if we were feeling.
The scene was shot 3 times. 3 times.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I always felt like Quark was the most clever of all the characters. I thought he was the most intelligent because he was always able to make people that disliked him like him, or have a special soft spot for his modus of operandi. So I really thought that Quark was the smartest person on the station, really. And in the episode where you have to get married, the House of Quark, I think, was it? The House of Quark. The way you cleverly got out of the marriage and the way you played the entire thing, I really enjoyed the wits behind that.
It's interesting. The other episode I rewatched, Armin, just in preparation for this last night, was Little Green Men, which
wonderful.
I've always been incredibly proud of.
It should be.
But which I hadn't seen in 20 years. So it was really wonderful seeing you and Aaron and Max working together in all those scenes, seeing the battle of wits between you and the human characters. It was just a lot of fun to watch you, and then the scenes that you got to do with Renee, of course, which are always dynamite. Like those are always like guaranteed gold for us. So it was really fun to watch that. I think that to me was the reason I watched that was I felt like that was probably as an episode that was going for comedy, I felt like maybe that was the best realized comedic episode of the show. Maybe, arguably, there were some other ones, but it was definitely in the top 5 or 10 comedic episodes of the show. Right, I would think.
I would definitely agree with that. The idea, the whole concept of the episode was delicious, and all of us were enjoying it from the very first moment. So, and we had wonderfully comedic conflicts. So. Yes, absolutely. But going back to profit and loss, sorry.
Yeah, let's go back to that.
So, and I will be mute. You guys can talk. And I want you to be honest, Robert. I didn't play it the way you saw it, but I don't know how else I could have played it. So please educate me 25 years later. What was the concept that I somehow missed? And as you say, I'm very happy with the episode. It turned out really well. No regrets, of course, but I'm fascinated to find out what was there that I didn't see.
It's tough to remember, to be honest, after 25 years, and having just watched it, like, I thought it turned out terrific. So terrifically. Excellent. But what I remember was that you bring a certain comedic energy to scenes with, for example, Max, that you did not bring to the scenes with Natima. You really sold the drama of those scenes. You sold Quark as a man in love and as a leading man. You were playing him as a leading man lover. You were not playing him as
Woody Allen.
Yes. That's a good example. Like Woody Allen in a love story at that time, or even before that in Bananas or something like that, or you know what I mean? Yeah. Like you were bringing so much dignity to those scenes. And I think in our imagination, we imagined that he was a little bit more of a fool in love, if that makes sense. That your love for her would make you more of a fool in those scenes. And what you played was that your love for her made you more of a hero in those scenes. And I'm not saying one is necessarily better than the other. I'm just saying that was in our imagination. We thought that you were going to be a love-struck fool in some ways in those scenes. And that would bring comedic energy to those scenes because you'd be tripping over yourself. But of course, because you were playing Humphrey Bogart, because you were playing the hero in the scenes, you're bringing all this dignity, an enormous amount of dignity to those scenes.
Dignity in an empty sack is worth the price of the sack.
That's right.
That is a rule of acquisition, all right.
We just covered that episode, yeah.
Yeah, but like I don't
go
always
back
agree with rules of acquisition. Sometimes I believe that they're wrong. Yeah, but they were satire, of course. Like, I don't believe in almost any of them. Like, essentially, if there's a rule of acquisition, it's probably wrong. It's probably morally or at least philosophically wrong. Most of them. Like, keep your ears open. God bless the seventh. That's perfect.
There we go.
But dignity in an empty sack is worth the empty sack. I don't believe that for a second.
Me neither. Yeah.
But I thought it was something that the Ferengi would believe.
Robert, do you go back? So you see Armin playing this role in it completely how unexpectedly, not the way you wanted it done, but you see it's working. So do you go back and make rewrites and take jokes out, or what do you do after that point?
So in that situation, remember us being a little frustrated when we started getting dailies back. This is just like honest talk, right? But what we did was we realized that there was no way. We're not going to reshoot every scene with Natima, and also like it was such a strong choice that what we ended up doing was just in the editing room. We didn't rewrite anything while it was shooting, from what I remember. We rewrote all the time. That was often not for reasons of where we wanted to rewrite. But what we did in the editing room was we cut a lot of jokes out of those scenes. From what I remember, we cut all the Casablanca riffs. There were. You remember there were actual lines from Casablanca or plays on those lines?
I think it's a long time. I have a vague memory, and having just seen the episode like yourself, they're not there, so I don't remember. But I could almost bet the house that because they were there in the original script, that was the impetus to play it like Humphrey Bogart, because it's Casablanca.
Yeah. Yeah, and we were sort of picturing it as like a spoof of Casablanca. So we were sort of looking at it more as like a riff on it. And you were playing it. So what we did in the editing room, not that we ever went in the editing room, what we did in our notes to the editor was take those moments out. We just cut back the comedy in those scenes and we let them play as dramatic scenes.
Let me ask you a question. Thank you for that. As a question, because that's early on. That's the second season.
Second season, yeah.
After that, there were more heroic moments than there had been before. Do you think because the writers you were very sensitive about catching what was in dailies and using that for future episodes, you did a marvelous job that way. Do you think because I played it that way, that you felt more comfortable at times, and it was sparse, and that's good, it should only be a spice, not the main meal, to give me those moments in some of the other episodes?
I think so. I think that there were two things that sort of came out of that episode, from what I remember. One was to know that if we put you in a situation that was a dramatic situation, you were going to play that drama, and that you were going to play the heroic, not always like, heroic Superman version, but the heroic protagonist. You were going to play Quark as a protagonist in those scenes.
Mighty Mouse.
No, not Mighty Mouse, but Humphrey Bogart, as Rick, or like you were going to legitimately go for those moments as a protagonist. So I think that was one thing, was being aware of that, so that when you have those moments, that we wrote to that. And the other impetus was to throw more of the one-liners to Max or Aaron.
They were better at it. I will be, it's time to tell truth. They were better at it than I was. They were better at it. And I have no shame about that. They were incredibly good comedic actors. They're still, Aaron's gone, of course, but Max is still, He's intrinsically funny. Aaron is intrinsically funny.
Mhm.
I am not intrinsically funny. I'm a curmudgeon. So I was probably very happy you did that, because I could just be there like Abbott, like an Abbott and Costello, and just have a reaction. I could play Odo to their Quark, and harumph. That's what I could do.
And I think that's an underrated talent for people watching comedic scenes, is understanding that the person who's giving space for the other guy to do the joke and setting up the timing and then giving the audience reaction to the joke is a comedian. It's just playing a completely different role. Again, I'll talk out of school for a second, which is on Elementary. When I was working on Elementary, watching scenes early on when I first got there, watching dailies and cuts of Lucy and Johnny working together as Holmes and Watson, and watching Lucy and knowing, like, having seen Lucy do like some amazing comedy, she can be hilarious. She can be so damn funny. And in fact, I think she just announced that she's going to be leading a sitcom coming up. Like that's her next gig, is a lead in a sitcom, which I totally buy. But watching her not do that in some of these scenes with Johnny, and from my experience with Armin, but also from having, been a little older and a little more studied, realizing she's abboting this scene. She's playing the Abbott role, so that the Costello character, which is Johnny, because who's going to be bigger in a scene than Sherlock, right? Can have the room and can get that energy up, so that it isn't just like two people trying to like outdo each other for one-liners. It's someone, an incredibly generous and talented actress, giving the space for the overtly comedic character to shine, so that those comedic scenes can be even better than they were. And that's a super huge talent, which I didn't understand as well back then, to be honest. But I can see you doing when I rewatch stuff.
I hope in their situation it was the same as ours. Once I came to the realization that Max was a lot funnier than me, and this is really important for both Aaron and Max, and Renee too, although we didn't have the same relationship on camera. I loved all three of them, absolutely, from the bottom of my heart, loved them. And whatever I could do to make them look better, that was fine by me. I had my name at the top of the show. Those guys didn't. And if I could make them be more appreciated, if I could make them stand out, I'm sure there was some competition. I'm only human. But if I could do that, then I was more than happy to do that.
I think that I hope there are actors watching this and hearing that, because I feel like that is such a wonderful and beautiful part of some actors' approach to the way things are. That generosity of spirit and collaboration is what made the cast of Deep Space Nine so amazing.
We were a big family. One of our greatest joys was watching Sirach grow up and watching him go from, what were you, 13 when you started, 12?
Yeah.
And into the adult and the tallest member of our cast. By
and that's saying something, by the way. The Deep Space Nine cast was, one of the things you don't know about Armin is he's not particularly short. We just had an insanely tall cast.
But I can attest to the generosity, especially when it comes to the performances, because Avery, generous with me when we were doing scenes, allowing me to flourish and giving me the assist. And I kind of liken it to basketball, because, I really don't know Abbott and Costello as well as you guys do. But when I think about it in terms of basketball, I think of the person who's either passing you the ball to give you the assist, or the guy shooting the ball. And sometimes when you're working with actors, they all want to shoot the ball. They all want the ball, they want to shoot, and very few people want to pass. But we were on a set where everybody was so generous, passing the ball and saying, well, okay, it's your turn, or I'll set you up for a lob. You go and get it. You go and get it. And I also noticed that same dynamic with Renee. You mentioned Renee, but I noticed that with Renee as well, the late great Renee Auberjonois, who did a lot of setting you up for the joke sometimes, where it was, okay, now it's your turn to drop the comedy.
Renee was very good about that. Renee is one of the funniest actors you'll ever meet. And he was wonderful as Odo, but he was very good about allowing other people to be in the limelight. He was very good about that.
Yes.
That was my first experience really working with a cast and writing for a group of actors and writing for a troupe essentially. And I cannot believe how lucky I was that was my first gig, you know?
As all of us,
as all of us,
also lucky too. It was a phenomenal group of people, and as you say, it's not just the 8; it's the 30 or so. Any one of those 30 people and more plus could have shouldered responsibility, and often did, and carried the show on their shoulders. And because, but it all starts with the writing. Because we had good writers and good performers. I believe it's why the show, after 25 plus years, it still holds up. I'm very prejudiced, but I think our show holds up much better than some of our the contemporary other Star Trek shows.
Mm-hmm. I don't disagree. Hey, I know you've probably talked about this a million times, but one of the things you touched on earlier that I just wanted to go back to was the physicality of the role. The playing a Ferengi was enormously physically taxing. And I don't know that the audience really understands that all the time.
You're not supposed to see it.
No, of course not. You guys are hiding it. But
we're
you want
to. We can't show you how it works.
Well, let's let people behind the scenes just for a little bit and just talk about like how physically hard it was to play that part.
Well, the great irony of all, since you've opened up that Pandora's box, is that we were deaf. We have those huge ears on our heads. Deaf. We can't hear through all that rubber. If I turned my back on you and there was more than one conversation going on, I couldn't make out what it was. To this day, one of my favorite memories is Nana telling a whole series of directors when I turn my back, he can't hear you. He can't hear you. I could hear her, but I never told her that. And because my particular makeup, as opposed to Max's or Aaron's, was completely sealed, there was no space where air could come in. So the stale air just that was in the head when I put it on stayed there. All the sweat, all the heat, it had nowhere to dissipate. So as I said, after about the 10th or 11th hour, I was on fumes, and it was, I'm not bragging, but it was often difficult to just keep going in the last hours of the day, because it was like having a head cold. It was just, what's my next line?
Yeah.
But
there was dehydration, right? Too, I would expect.
Absolutely, a lot of dehydration. Let me quote my brilliant wife when I complained about this one day to her. As everyone knows, I was a big Star Trek fan prior to doing the show. And so her wonderful piece of advice to me was, Armin, if you want to be a knight, you have to wear the armor.
Oh.
Nice.
Wow, that's beautiful. I don't know that this ever happened, but I did another science fiction show where there was an actor who was going to be heavy prosthetic. And before we hired him, I said, you need to call Armin Shimerman. I'll give you his number, and you need, or Andy Robinson, and you need to talk to them about what you're signing yourself up for, because you have to understand that this is going to be very physically demanding. And
God bless you for mentioning Andy, because in my opinion, and I'm not trying to be humble, his was worse.
I think the Cardassian makeup was the worst, right?
And also had the rubber suit, the wetsuit. There was no place for him to breathe anywhere. So he had it, and the performances that he gave under all that duress was truly amazing. For years, Ethan Phillips and I would argue who had the worst makeup and who. He got to play a Ferengi once, and he said, "No, yours is worse."
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the actor that I'm talking about on this other show, like he quit. He couldn't do it after 2 years. And so the fact that you guys did it for 7 and 26 a year, I've always had enormous respect for that.
Part of the relief, it's just going to be a strange comment. Part of the relief that I could face the makeup for 7 years was I got to go to Buffy. Because I wasn't involved in that character 24/7. And so when I just played a human on Buffy, that sort of relieved the tension, gave me a chance to breathe, kept me busy. God, there were I remember one day, I think I worked 26 hours straight.
Oh my God.
But because I was relieved on the Buffy set, it made it easier for me to come back and put the armor on and go back to work.
That's amazing. One last thing I wanted to bring up, I think. Do we have time for one more topic?
Actually, I was just going to say, we've got about 1 minute left.
Oh, this is too long, but I'm going to just say it real quick anyway.
Let's do it.
You could argue that Quark had the least character growth of anyone on the show. In that Quark's goal was to stay who he was.
Interesting. Yeah.
Over the course of the show. How did you feel about that?
Up until the penultimate episode, I would have totally agreed with you. I would have said, I think I even said to you, or perhaps some of the other ones, must have been you and Ira and some of the others, I don't see an arc for this character. He's become a god. She's become a hero. He's going back to his people. Sirach is a writer. Everybody has a huge arc. I don't see it for my character. And then in the penultimate episode, and I've just forgotten its name, where you had me going back to first stages from the first season, I went, oh my God, look how far I've progressed. So I would have agreed up until the penultimate episode. And then I went, no, look at the progress.
Yeah, and I want to add to that just a little bit, because I felt like now that I'm watching the show, I felt like Quark was the most set and ready from the beginning from watching the show. Like, you kind of knew who Quark was from the beginning. And I feel like as soon as the first episode hit, your character was the most. I see Cisco kind of growing into it, and I see other characters. Dr. Bashir still kind of finding he's a little goofy in the beginning, and Dax is a little bit. But I feel like Quark knows who he is right from the jump, and also Odo's character as well. I felt like we were the most defined from the beginning.
Well, I certainly had two things going for me in that respect, Sirach. First, I had played Ferengi before, so this wasn't totally. But because I had played Ferengi before, and they were such god-awful performances, that my agenda was, and going back to Profit and Loss, my agenda was to give this breed of people some sort of standing, some sort of respect. And so that's why my mind immediately, despite the fact that it was Humphrey Bogart, this was a love scene, and I don't think I ever had another love scene after that episode. So this was my one opportunity to show that the Ferengi could be just as human as the humans. That was an agenda I had from the very first day of shooting. I was going to try to get people to forget what I had done on Next Generation.
And you did it, and look, you did it. Like,
totally.
I don't think anyone even thinks of the way the Ferengi were played on those few episodes.
I do.
But
it's
Deep
been
Space Nine. Deep Space Nine defined that species in a way that they weren't really defined.
And that's because you guys, the writers, were enormously generous to the Ferengi. You did for us what some of the other writers did for the Klingons. we became an established race with a history, with an ethos, with a background that people could get behind. You could have left us alone and just let us frolic as gerbils around on the set, but you didn't. You gave us depth. You gave us depth.
Absolutely.
And we can't do that. You know, if anyone thinks the actors are making up the lines, they're woefully mistaken. You gave us that depth, and we ran with it. And you had, it wasn't just the three of us, Jeffrey too, and Moogie, and all of us got rich material to expand upon. Wallace. We were talking about generosity before. Wallace gave me my one moment of jealousy. I had 4 minutes of jealousy during some episode watching Wallace perform, and I was the green-eyed monster that just bit me in the butt, and I was enormously jealous of Wallace, and it lasted for about 4 minutes. And when the 4 minutes was up, I went, oh, this is why certain people act this way. It's out of this kind of jealousy. It's that the other person is so phenomenally good, so phenomenally right, that you get jealous. You fear for your own career. You fear for your own work. And I had 4 minutes of that. And my God, that was a maturation process.
Well, I wish we had more time to talk about this, because I feel like we need a part 2 at some point. But no, I mean, really, there's so much more to discuss. By the way, it's called Dogs of War was the penultimate episode you mentioned.
Dogs of War.
We do have to run right now. Very sorry, but this has been amazing. You know how people say, I'd love to be a fly on the wall with. This has been a moment like that for myself and Sirach, I think.
Thank you, guys.
I always wanted to know, and I took you guys out to lunch at least once a year. You know, what are you thinking? But you were very close-mouthed. And I wish the powers that be had allowed the writers to come on the set. One of the great moments of our show wasn't on camera. Sirach, you were there, and I know you were there, Robert. It's when Ira brought all the writers out into the bar, into Quark's bar, and said, "Do you know who these people are?" And we didn't know who you were.
Yeah, somebody, Renee Echeverria, anybody? Which one?
Well, this was a Christmas skit. We can get into it, but yeah, it was a joke. We all, but to be fair, we all grew goatees and wore the exact same shirt, so we were.
It didn't matter. You could have worn signs with your names on them. You still didn't know who you were. We had no idea who you were.
I remember that.
And I, for one, always thought that was wrong. I thought the writers should be speaking to the actors. I understand in TNG there were problems. But from what we all discussed today, and we all know from our history, those kind of ego problems, there may have been some, maybe, but for the most part, our people were willing to learn. We were there to learn and to give everybody the best performances, and I'm sure the best writing that we could. That was our agenda. We weren't interested in having a good time. People always ask us, you know, what were some of the practical jokes? And we look cross-eyed. We go, that's not our set.
No, it wasn't the writer's room either. It is the way the show was made. I think that the thing that, I wish that there'd been more communication, less disassociation, as you said. But I think at the end of the day, you watch those episodes, and the writing sings because the acting sings, and the acting sings because the writing sings, and it's this beautiful thing that things worked in harmony. And even when the things that were coming out from the set weren't what we expected, they were wonderful. They were terrific, and the show holds up because of it. I think, having watched a couple episodes just yesterday.
I think you're right.
Thank you.
But without kissing your butt, because there's no reason to. But it all starts because I'm a writer, because you're a writer, because everybody's a writer.
If it's not on the page, then there's nowhere to go. That's
Not on the
that's
page,
what
not
Armin's
on the
gonna say.
stage.
Yeah, there's nowhere to go
Wow.
if we don't have a blueprint, we don't have a building. So
But believe me, I've written plenty of scenes for less talented people in the ensuing years. Not that that's the rule. It's occasional, and every time it happens, I think back to knowing with dead certainty, 100% certainty that every single person we were writing for was going to deliver, and that.
And you
If
had
the writing is good, it's because you guys inspired us to be that confident in the writing, to take chances, to push things, to take things to another realm, to write real dramatic scenes for a character like Quark, to know that you could give an entire episode to Jake, an 18-year-old actor. We could give you an entire episode, and you would deliver it, and that's a rare and wonderful thing. So thank you.
Thank
and
you.
I'm glad we got
guys.
to talk about this after all these years.
Only
been great.
25 years.
Yeah.
But
Well, we hope to have both of you back sometime. This has really been great. You guys are just always so wonderful to talk to. You bring so many things to the table, so many things to talk about. And there's always so much more when you do start talking. There's more things that we want to discuss from there. So thank you guys very, very much for joining us.
I will leave it to Robert. Anytime all the four of us want to get together and do that, I'm always up for that because I'm fascinated to find out what I missed. And I admit to missing stuff, and I want to know more. You can't do anything about it. It's set in stone. But I'd love to find out what I missed.
Stay tuned for part 2, ladies.
I know. My gears were already cranking. I'm like, all right, I'm going to look for IMDb for a written by Robert Hewitt Wolfe and a Quark episode somewhere in there.
We'll do this again, I'm sure. It's always, I think, look, the show was made out of love, and that I feel like it always comes out when we get together. So
thank you. And it's been how many years, Robert, since I've seen you?
I feel like I ran into you somewhere at some point, like maybe 15 years ago. But because I don't do the conventions that much, I don't get to see people the way that other people do. So I'm trying to do more of these things so I get to see people because I miss everybody.
Well, it's always good to see your face. And how's your family doing? I asked.
Good. Celeste's great. We have a new puppy, and we're both healthy and happy and all that good stuff. And you guys are doing good too. I would hope.
We're fine. Kitty, as you may or may not know, runs a theater in Los Angeles. So she's busy doing that. We don't have a puppy. We have an old dog. But we're very happy with her. And it is great. It's great to see all of you. It's great to see you. And Robert, 15 years, it's gone like that. So.
I know. It's too long. It's too long, man. All right. Take care.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
All the best. And everybody at home, thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next one.